svakom slučaju želim vam se zahvaliti uopće na pozivu da sudjelujem na ovom kongresu. Prvenstveno hvala Maticu koji me prvi kontaktirao i evo drago mi je da Hrvatska udruga za coaching je već zapravo u kontaktu s vama i družili smo se na onom novoletnom vašem eventu i tu smo se malo bolje upoznali i veselim se da će biti još prilika da na taj neki način nastavimo suradnju. Svi mi koji se bavimo ovim poslom zapravo trebamo pomagati jedni drugima koliko god možemo jer svi imamo nekakvu istu svrhu, a to je da napravimo najbolje što možemo za svoje klijente, a onda sa time i za društvo u kojem živimo. And now I will switch to English as this is how I prepared my presentation, but of course if at any point I'm not understandable in English, I can try to switch to Croatian. I can also maybe try to understand what you're saying in Slovenian as well. I must say that I think I'm a little bit a different kind of Croatian that way because I actually understand Slovenian. I don't speak it that well, but I understand it really well because I have family that has lived their whole lives in Ljubljana. So basically I was listening into the lectures that were there previously and I followed everything. So please don't hesitate if at any point you are struggling with saying something in English or asking something in English or in Croatian, please say it in Slovenian. I'm sure we'll understand each other. As you already heard, I'm also a little bit maybe odd when talking about my background, as I'm an engineer is my first degree and my second degree is in positive psychology. It may sound like it's a little bit of a strange combination, but when people ask me why did I do it, I try to tell them that basically engineering and psychology have a lot in common. Both are dealing with trying to understand how something works. The difference is that when you're an engineer, you're trying to understand how a system works or a database works or an application works. And when you're a psychologist, you're trying to understand how humans work, how we work, how our human systems work together. So I see a lot of more, let's say, cross-references in both the fields than maybe it's obvious when you first think about it. That's the first thing I wanted to mention. And the second one is that basically because I'm an engineer and that is my first degree, I was always a seeker of truth and science-based evidence. So the same goes for my interest in positive psychology, because there you also follow research and you are trying to base your conclusions on hard data and everything that came out of research and not only on, let's say, anecdotal stories or experiences that can only be transmitted to maybe one person or another person, but to most of us as a whole. And now I will begin to share my screen, although my presentation you will see is more of a guide for thought than something that you're going to be really needing to, let's say, look at closely. I was interested to hear what your previous speakers had to say, because basically all of these topics are something that I am working on a lot. Just a little bit about my business background. After I finished my first degree, I worked for 10 years in corporations as a consultant and a project manager and a business process manager. So I delved into the business side of things quite a lot. And last 6 years, I have been a coach, trainer, and consultant, and I've been running my own business. So basically, I also try to use the experience that I have with businesses while I was a part of them, as now when I'm providing services to both businesses, and I'm also working with individual clients as a coach and a person that's running all kinds of personal development workshops. Basically, my mission is to try to help individuals and organizations use positive psychology to their benefit so that we can truly thrive as people and as organizations and as communities. As positive psychology is not that well known, I'm just going to briefly introduce the whole field, because I have to admit that quite often I still see quite a lot of misunderstanding about what positive psychology is or is not. So Positive psychology is in fact a study of optimal human functioning. And it started in the 80s of last century because psychologists back then in the American Psychological Associations realized that not enough time or effort is invested into trying to understand what is a good life. Okay, so clinical psychology up until then has been mostly focused on mental illnesses, mental disorders, and trying to understand how to help those people recover or live with these conditions, which is of course also very well worthy and something that we all need as a society, but not enough energy was invested into studying, okay, what makes a good life, what makes a life meaningful, worth living, and how can we all try to thrive and make the most of our lives. So basically positive psychology and its focus is what you see in this diagram. If mental health spectrum can be represented in this picture with the famous Gauss, where there's less people who are suffering from a mental disorder. Most people are in the middle who are of moderate mental health, and there's again not that many people who are flourishing. Basically, positive psychology is trying to move this curve more to the green side of things. Okay, so you're watching me in the webcam, so it's basically, this is for you on this side, but you can still follow me. I believe basically we're trying to help individuals and organizations and society as a whole to move more to the green side, to have more people flourish, to have more people of at least moderate mental health, if not even flourishing. Okay, so basically that is the focus of positive psychology. What I love about it is that it's incredibly rich. Okay, so it's not just positive thinking. Most people, when they hear this term, they think it's about optimism and about, thinking positively. However, this is just a small part of it. It basically also tries to research motivation and emotions and strengths and mindfulness and resilience, which is what I'm going to present today, and coping with different, hardships of life. And these are only some of the fields that positive psychology is looking into. So when I speak about positive psychology, I definitely want to get across that it's not just positive thinking, not just the one thing, but incredibly broad and really can give us a lot of tools for living a better life. As most of you here in the audience are coaches and mentors, while I present this topic, I'm also going to talk about what does it mean for us as service providers? So for people who are dealing with people on a daily basis and who are trying to also help others live and lead better lives. So I really think that for anybody who's a coach, a mentor, a trainer, a consultant, a counselor, but all of these terms that we use in these fields, it's definitely worthwhile to look into positive psychology. So I'm going to start with a brief analysis of what is happening out there. I'm pretty sure you're already aware of this, because if you're working with people, you cannot be not aware of the fact that we are not that well. I would dare to say that maybe now, when the days are longer and the measures are a little bit more soft than they were before, there is a bit of a rise of our well-being. But in general, this whole situation, this pandemic that has lasted for a year and a half now, has really taken a toll. It's what I've observed on myself, but also on people I work with, because it's incredibly new situation for all of us, and I think there is not one person that hasn't been touched by this whole situation. Some are obviously in a worse state, especially if they themselves suffered from COVID or long-lasting COVID, or somebody died in their family because of it, or just they lost their jobs, because many jobs have been lost and probably more will be lost during this pandemic. So we are definitely facing a greater need for our services in the field, which is the good news and the bad news at the same time. Yeah? I don't know about you guys, but I have seen an increase in the number of inquiries I've gotten in the last year and a half, really significantly, and it's more or less the same with everybody I speak to, both in Croatia and in other parts of the world. So this is definitely a good moment for us to let's say, emphasize how important all of these topics and personal development is. And I hope that many people are going to take the, let's say, incentive to create better lives and to not let this crisis, crush them to the ground, but unless that we rise up using resilience. How bad it is, I just wanted to share some research from Croatia. This is already old research. This was done at this time of last year. This is research that's been done by the psychology department from the University of Zagreb, and they are trying to. This was a great big report, but I took out just one piece of it that was trying to compare so depressive, anxious, and stress symptoms in the people that were surveyed compared before the start of the pandemic and during the pandemic. Or they say this was done in May last year, so a year ago. And as you can see, even just a year ago, all of these symptoms have been worse. Okay, so depression, anxiety, and stress all has gone up. And what I heard from people in the psychology department, because they've done another research, but the official results are not out yet, they saw an even greater increase later last year, and we're going to probably see an even greater increase when compared to the results from this time of this year. I'm not a pessimist, to be honest. I'm an optimist by nature, and also this is the work that I do and I believe in. So I do believe that we are going to get better as individuals and as a society. But we first need to start from being very much aware of what is now. Okay, it's not going to help us if we ignore how serious the situation in fact is. Okay, so when I speak about all of this and the fact that we are in a situation that has lasted for such a long time, resilience is a topic that has come up very frequently. Okay, so how resilient are you to all this? Are you getting through it or aren't you? And people are asking themselves this question, and of course we are observing this when we work with people. So I'm going to ask you now, because also this term has been used quite a lot of times and in different, let's say, contexts. What do you think is the definition of resilience? You can type in the chat and I'll take a look. Oops, sorry. Let's stop the share for a moment. Okay, so I already received a couple of answers. Jan said it's the ability to successfully adapt to changing circumstances. See, I understand Slovenian. Then Ksenia said it's coping mechanism to adapt to changes. Matic said it's an ability to cushion challenges you're dealt with. Cushion, that's a nice word. Daniela says it's to accept the reality and not to, let's say, worry. Did I translate that correctly? I think so. Ina says it's an ability which helps us bounce back from tough times. Okay. Mila says it's a resilience, is good fitness for whatever comes. Fitness, also cool use of the word. Thea says it's to be in balance. Okay, so as you can see, even within this community, and I would expect you to be people who are more familiar with the term resilience, we have some differences in how we perceive what resilience is or is not. Okay, so I'm going to start with first let's say the semantic definition, and then with the psychological definition, so that we are all on the same page on what we are actually talking about. And before I continue, Tatiana, thank you for the congratulations. That is very kind of you. She's referring to the book that I issued last year and the interview I had yesterday on Croatian television. I posted about that today on LinkedIn, so Tatiana, I guess, saw it there. Thank you. So what is resilience, in fact? Let me come back to the presentation. If you take a look at what's written in the dictionary, it's they say resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And you can see that some of these words are the words that you've been using. So recover, adjust, adapt, that's very similar. And what's being mentioned is misfortune. So any kind of event that we would probably label as bad for us. But also change, okay, because change can be good or bad, let's say, perceived as good or bad, but we would also need to be resilient to changes that are in fact good for us. For example, we want to move to another city, okay, that's a change we want to see happen, but we also need to be resilient while we are doing that change. Okay, so resilience is in fact the ability to recover from or adjust to whatever is happening, good or bad. That is the semantic definition. However, if you take a step further and you take a look at the definition of psychological resilience, then it is similar, but it is also a little bit different. So look at this. It's the ability to recover from failure or misfortune and the possibility to return to a previous level of functioning, as well as using this opportunity for personal growth and development. Okay, the similar parts are the failure and misfortune, okay? We are talking about returning to a previous level of functioning, which is why usually when we speak about resilience, we often use the term bouncing back, okay? So I was here, then I dropped, and then I'm bouncing back to the previous level of functioning. However, there's another addition when we speak about psychological resilience, and that is using this opportunity for personal growth and development. So basically, we're not only bouncing back, but we're sort of going up here. Okay, it's kind of difficult to say how big this step is, and sometimes it will be bigger, sometimes less big. But because of the misfortune or the change that we went through, we're actually better people, or people who are more resilient because of what happened. And for that, we need to invest in our own personal resilience to happen, okay? We all know that there are some people who are very resilient. You know, sometimes you feel like everything bounces off of them when it happens. They recover very quickly. And some people are so terrible at recovering, and it takes them months, if not even years or whole lives to recover from bad stuff that happened to them. So this is definitely a trait, but it also can be developed, okay? One metaphor I like to use when I deliver trainings or I speak to my clients about this notion is this flower that's growing from basically nothing, or it looks like it's nothing, okay? So that is the ability to use even harsh circumstances that are not in your favor to actually grow, okay? I have this cool story from one of the trainings I delivered, where one of the participants said, okay, I have a perfect example from my surroundings for resilience. I said, okay, what is it? She said, I had planted 2 willow trees in my backyard. They were perfectly the same, and they were already quite grown. And then we were making some changes in the backyard, and we needed to take out one of these trees and move it to another place. And we expected this tree to probably die down because it was quite a harsh change and it was already very grown. However, when they moved it to the next place, this second tree became even larger than the first one. Okay, so it was moved, you know, drastically and unwillingly. However, it used this opportunity to grow even further. Okay, so these kind of metaphors, I think, help us understand what can happen to us when we are in fact resilient. Okay, so when you look at this definition of resilience, now I would like to ask you to try to give yourself a level of resilience. Daniela, do we have the poll ready?
Yes,
perfect.
We have ready.
Okay, so can you please launch the poll so that we can ask this question to all the participants? So the question is, how resilient do you think you are on a scale of 1 to 10? Obviously 10 is most resilient and 1 is least resilient. Where would you put yourself now that you've heard what resilience really is?
All right. This, okay. You can see already?
I can see the question as a participant as well, so I hope everybody else can see it.
Okay. Already 17 people vote.
Okay. Let's give them a couple more seconds. Okay, I believe everybody who wanted to answer answered. So can you close the poll, please, and show us the results?
Yes. Okay, do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so we are very resilient.
You're definitely very resilient. I'm not surprised by this answer because I would say that people who work with other people need to be resilient. Otherwise, it would be a very difficult job. Okay, so 45% of people answered 9, and we have a distribution to 8, 7, 6, 5. Nobody said it's 3, 2, 1. I'm happy to hear that. Whichever level you appointed to yourself, the key here is to understand that you can develop it even further. Okay, those of you that are already on 9, you can be on level 10, 5, 6, 7, 8. Also, you can be even further than that. Okay. Thank you very much for your help, Daniela.
Okay.
So let's take a look at what makes up resilience. I have to admit that if you look at different research, you're going to find different divisions, okay, or different elements that are mentioned. I try to put together, let's say, elements from different type of research. Of course, if you go a bit deeper and you take a look at resilience for a specific group of people or resilience to a particular circumstance, then this might vary. But I'm trying to give you a general look of what is in resilience. And it's not just one thing, it's many. Okay, so on the top of the list is awareness. Basically, if we don't have self-awareness, then it's very difficult to develop my own resilience. I think that we as coaches and mentors are very much aware again of this. Then there's flexibility. Okay, so ability to adapt to circumstances that are changing. And this is also something that can be developed. Some people are very flexible, some are not. Something that helps with flexibility is being open to change, being curious, for example. And this is also a trait I think that we as coaches need to have, because otherwise we can't be curious about the people who are standing in front of us. So flexibility is another element of resilience. Then it's just regulating impulses and emotions. Okay, so if my mood throughout the day goes like this, I'm not very resilient. Everything that happens is kicking me out of balance, okay? So I would need to work also on being able to regulating these impulses and emotions and trying to manage them and not just be a victim of whatever is happening to me. Then there is positive self-image. How I perceive myself is going to affect my belief or whether or not I can recover from stuff, okay? So people who are, let's say, confident and have more positive self-image are going to be more resilient. Then there's self-efficacy, which is a term not that much known, and it's very interesting. It's basically, I'm going to put it in, lay terms. It's basically when you enter something, whether or not you believe that you can do it. Okay, I love that quote. If you think you can, or if you think you cannot, you're right. And basically, self-efficacy is a theory that revolves around that statement. So it has been proven that if you enter a bad, let's say, situation or some kind of challenge, and you just believe that you are able to go through it, that you'll be better at it. Okay, so we need to work on our self-efficacy as well. Then there's self-esteem, just how worthy we think we are or we are not, and whether or not we deserve to lead a good life or not. Okay, because otherwise we might, when something bad happens to us, we might start saying, oh, I deserved it, I'm such a bad person, nothing is going to ever be good for me, and so on. Okay, so that is obviously not going to help my resilience. Then there is another part, and that is the so-called internal locus of control. So whether or not I take responsibility for myself and for what is happening, or I always blame something or someone outside of myself. I'm going through all of these very quickly, just to give you an overview, and then if you want, we can dive a little bit deeper into some of them. Then, of course, our relationships and how much support we get from our relationships is going to affect our resilience. We all know that when we are feeling down, or not all, I would say, but most people, when we're feeling down or when we need help, we're going to call somebody, okay? So whether or not we have people that we can rely on and that we can actually be very open and honest with is going to affect our resilience. If something happens to me and I have nobody to call at 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm not going to be that resilient. Then humor, a lovely part of resilience. I would dare to say that in this whole area of Europe, we're quite good at it. We are going to take even the darkest situations and turn it into something funny. And I think it's quite a good coping mechanism that we have. Obviously, it's not enough. Whether or not we can laugh at things that are hard is going to be helpful, but if we can't do all of these other things, it's not going to make a huge difference. Then it's using our own strengths. Larissa was mentioning how they have coaches that are trained in Gallup strengths. In positive psychology, we mostly use another classification, which is VIA strengths. They're a little bit different from Gallup, but in any case, a great part of positive psychology is getting to know your strengths and knowing how to use them. So again, if you are aware of what your strengths are, then when something bad happens, I can say, okay, but I know that I am, courageous, and that I like new things, and that I'm curious, and I can take these strengths and use them to go through a challenge. Then there's the strength of perspective. So being able to put things into different views, putting yourself in another person's shoes, or even taking a bird view on the whole situation is something that will also help us our resilience. And then there's also obviously optimism, which is a big part of positive psychology. So whether or not you believe that things will turn out well in the end. There is some research that has proven that around 25% of our optimism is hereditary. So basically what we're born with, and 75% is what we learned to do. Okay, so basically, again, some of it is, the way we were born, but a big part is something that we can develop. And the last thing I wanted to mention in this slide are positive emotions. Okay, so we need to experience some kind of positive emotions, and there's more of them than we might think. There is obviously happiness and joy, but there's also love and calm and serenity and awe and inspiration and pride, relief. These are all positive emotions. So we need to understand what they are and have them, experience them often enough so that we can be resilient. Okay, so when I speak about this topic, I try to visualize it as that resilience is something like a puzzle. Okay, so you need to have more elements of the puzzles for it to make sense. Okay, it would be perfect if we would have all the elements, but life is not perfect, neither are we. So we need to think about whether or not we have enough so that we feel resilient enough. Okay, and if we have one of these very well developed, for example, I don't know, I'm great at optimism, but I don't have anybody to rely on, I'm not going to be resilient. Okay, so all of these are obviously also kind of interconnected, and when one develops, you're going to affect the other ones as well. Jan, you asked a question. Please go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, my question is if you know what would be the impact factor for the subtraits of resilience.
I do not have that information, but if you look at the research that I went into was also emphasizing what I just told you before, is that you need more than one. Okay, so even if I would tell you that, I don't know, the impact factor is just, I don't know, for internal locus control 10 or 15%. Okay. No. She was very passionate about this topic. Even if I would tell you that the, I don't know, impact for internal locus control is 15%, that doesn't mean you don't need to develop the other ones. Okay.
Yeah,
so
but it does give me some guidance on what is better to work at for most of the people.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I can't give you, I'm sorry, this information. Also because I took out all of this from different research. Okay. So I would be comparing also apples and oranges if I would even try to give you the numbers. If I come across anything like what you're looking for, I will make sure to contact you and let you know. Okay. So basically, when we are speaking about resilience, as I said, we need to develop more than one thing. Because you are coaches, I would say that we first need to work on our own resilience. So if out of all of these things that are mentioned here, you see one area where you're really not that strong at, that's what you need to be working on, okay? Or if you see that you're very strong in one of these areas, but quite not strong in many others, you need to start to develop this. Obviously, this format of presentation doesn't allow me to go into much detail onto how to develop each one of these. It would be a training. We could be talking about this for maybe another opportunity, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what you should, let's say, look into. Also, if you're working on your own resilience, when you're working with clients, you can try to perceive how they are in these particular areas, okay? You can ask them about their own resilience when they go through challenges. You can ask them about, or you can just try to notice when they speak about themselves, how much they have, let's say, positive self-image, self-efficacy, self-esteem. Are they able to regulate impulses and emotions? Are they always blaming others so they don't have really an internal locus of control? How are their relationships, etc.? So when you're working with them, you can try to notice what is an area of improvement for them as well, and try to help them in their journey of developing this part, so developing their whole resilience. I'm going to also briefly mention the connection between resilience and well-being, because well-being is another topic that it's been very much used in the last year and a half. It's also very, let's say, topic dear to my heart. Here in Croatia, we also conducted a series of events on well-being in organizations, because most of the morning you were speaking about organizational part of coaching and mentoring. Maybe you can take a look at this. I'm going to share the link to YouTube because we put up the recordings of all three events we had, and we had multiple speakers at each event. Each event was an hour and a half, and we spoke about what they're doing in their particular organizations to actually maintain the well-being of their employees. And we had three topics. One was general, okay, what are your practices? One was return on investment. So we had management members who were speaking about their take on well-being. And we had a third event, which was talking about creating alliances within the organization and how to develop the initiatives further. Okay, so that's the stuff about well-being in organizations, and I just wanted to mention the connection between my own well-being and resilience. Obviously, it is connected, but it's not the same thing. Okay, well-being is also a very broad term, but it speaks about, at least in positive psychology, about these elements. It speaks about positive emotions, which is something you saw in the previous slide. It speaks about engagement. Okay, so how engaged are you in the things that you're doing? It speaks about relationships, again, something that you did see in the previous slide. Then meaning, how much meaning there is in my life, accomplishment, whether or not I'm setting and achieving goals, and health. Okay, so it's not the same thing as resilience, but it's definitely interconnected. And if you're working on your well-being, you're probably going to develop your own resilience and vice versa. Okay. I also wanted to briefly mention another, let's say, take on resilience, which is not that common, and that is existential resilience. Okay, or philosophical, or maybe you encountered another term, or even spiritual resilience. I think that one of the things that we all need to work on, on ourselves and definitely with clients, is facing the truth and the reality of life. Okay, so apart from the psychological side of things, this is, I would say, an even broader term. Whether or not we are able to face what is actually happening around us, and facing and not trying to be an ostrich. You know what an ostrich is, that bird that puts their head in the sand, or at least that's the let's say word of mouth that they do that sometimes. Somewhere I read that it's not true, that we are the only ones who think that it is. Never mind. But so that we are not ignoring what is happening around us or in us. Okay, so if we have a continuous practice of facing the truth and reality, it can be, I for one try to do that through meditation. It's something that helps me deal with existential view of life, but also definitely is building up my well-being and my resilience, is to try to be really honest with yourself and about what's going on in the world. Okay, this is also something I just wanted to plant a seed of thought, and not greater than that. So to wrap up everything that I mentioned today, my message, or this is not mine, it's a quote I found and that I really liked, is it says that life doesn't get easier or more forgiving, but we get stronger and more resilient. So I think that we all need to take resilience very seriously. And the good news is that it can be really developed, and it is up to us to not only develop it when something bad happens, but to be proactive about it and to, let's say, develop it in peaceful times so that we can better weather any storm that comes our way. Thank you for your attention. This is my contact info. I can be found in all of these social networks. The book that I mentioned is on the left. It's in Croatian for now. I'm planning on translating it, but I'm still dealing with sales in Croatian, so it will come at a certain point in time. And I'm happy to connect in whatever social network and still stay in touch. Now it's time for your questions or comments. So I'm going to remove this presentation and read what you have to say, or listen to what you have to say.
Okay. Ja, Ivana, krasna, odlična prezentacija, navdušujoča, in tudi v bistvu to je to, kar sem na začetku rekla, ne? Ko se združita tehnični in pa psihološki če temu tako rečem, potem so res tukaj presežki, ne? Tako da zelo mi je bilo všeč tudi pojasnevanje definicij, ker velikokrat zelo površno jih razumemo in potem seveda tudi površno gremo v napačno smer ali pa preveč površno se lotimo kakšne aktivnosti. Tako da, Ivana, res hvala za to. Sedaj pa seveda, kdo se bo prvi opogumil in kaj povprašal? Predlagam, da mogoče zastavimo 1 do 2 vprašanji, potem pa, Ivana, se boš nam pridružila tudi v diskusiji, a ne? Potem kasneje. Ivana?
Tu sem.
Aha.
Čekam.
I have a question. You've mentioned bouncing back a bit higher after a setback, and it got me thinking of post-traumatic stress and its lesser known cousin, post-traumatic growth. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on the connection between the two?
It's very much connected. what resilience is, it's also post-traumatic growth. However, post-traumatic growth has in itself trauma. Okay, so I would say it's a subset of resilience. Okay, we need post-traumatic growth as well if we're dealing with trauma, and some elements maybe can be translated to other situations, but the resilience is, more wide, and it speaks about any kind of change or misfortune that cannot necessarily be categorized as trauma.
Okay.
Thank you for your question.
Okay. Ja. Še kakšno vprašanje? Some other questions? Okay. If not, Ivana, you will stay with us also in the moderating discussion?
Yes, however, I'm not sure how long will it last, because I'm going to need to leave in the afternoon. I have a previous engagement. Sorry?
Till 1 o'clock p.m.
That's fine. Yeah, I can stay till 1 o'clock.
Please, yes, okay. Thank you. Če ni vprašanj, bi se Ivani lepo zahvalili. Predlagam tudi big aplavz, oziroma aplavz, kar tako, da se sliši tudi, da se sklopi mikrofone, da se sliši aplavz. Ivana, veselje, čast mi je bilo, da smo vas lahko poslušali, in se priporočamo že za naslednjo leto, ker mislim, da ste še veliko pustili za naslednjič.